Hi guys. So we survived week one. We are entering week two. I hope you're all doing great. I hope you had a restful weekend. And today, this is our second video where I'm going to give you a little bit of feedback about what you submitted by last night. I'm going to cover two chapters, 2 and 3 of our textbook, and I'm going to remind you what you need to submit by Sunday midnight. I have my notes here. Uh, so I have already submitted the extra credit for obviously the synchronous meeting. I'm sorry, that the first out of the six that we had on Wednesday, right? We're gonna have more synchronous meetings as we go, and all of them again are on our Moodle site as you look at it and the way it is designed week by week. So if you go to the following weeks, you will find the next synchronous meetings. They are already set up. Now, I submitted the grades, the extra credit for the ECLO. And concerning LO1, the average score is 87%. There was no, there wasn't any specific item that most of you missed. However, I want to make a comment about one item, one question that several of you missed the correct answer, and it was about which factor we are investigating. And I know the wording is a little bit confusing. I follow the book and I'm using their language. I could be confused as well if I was taking that's a specific LO. So the answer is there were several answers and options that you could choose from, and the answer was that the answer is on page 4. So there is a whole paragraph about experimental research where it shows you what we're actually what is the factor that we are investigating, right? What are we manipulating? Sometimes we have that in one group, in another group we don't have it, or we have more or less. So if you look on page 4, and that's the way I'm going to answer any items that are not very clear, I'm going to give you where the answer is so you go find it. So the answer again is on page 4. There's a whole paragraph about experimental research. So look there, and if you missed that question, that item, that's where you should go back and study a little bit more and figure out why you didn't answer successfully in this item. Overall, I'm pretty satisfied. So we have started strong, and that's how I would like us to continue. So for next week or this week, I'm going to share my screen. Give me 1 second. Let's see. So for next week, we have, as you can see here, LO2 and LO3, right? No synchronous meeting. As you can see, some of you have already answered, for example, LO2. I see 4 attempts. Again, this one closes on the 14th. at midnight. Same format. Sunday midnight, you have to by Sunday midnight, you have to submit something, and I'm going to be looking at it on Monday morning as I am right now and sending you those videos. Okay. Same with LO3. So for this week, we have 2 LOs. One announcement to make before I go and start talking about chapters 2 and 3 is that the office hours are not going to be tomorrow because I am presenting at a conference. So I'm moving the office hours, and I'm going to include that in our email, the email that I'm sending out. So I'm moving the office hours to Wednesday. Again, from 8 to 12:30, everything is the same. I just have to, because tomorrow I am presenting at a conference. So there's a conflict, okay? So this is for week 2, LO2, LO3 office hours on Wednesday. I'm going to stop sharing this, and we'll start sharing our PowerPoint slideshows. If I find them, that'll be nice. All right, that's chapter 3. I want chapter 2. Let me close this one. There we go. So today, we're gonna move, like chapter 1 was very introductory. So today we're gonna move a little bit more interesting stuff. And you will see that as we go, all these things will apply towards your FLO, your final learning opportunity. So the basic idea that I want you to know about chapter 2, obviously, is that thing that's called evidence-based practice, EBP, okay? Let's see if this is working. Excellent. So all the chapters are starting again with the same figure, because this is very important for us to understand, and we're going to be explaining different parts of this. This is a scientific method, right? As we go today, what we're going to do is, as you can see on the right side up at the top, we search for answers, right? So today, we're going to talk about the very top part, the evidence-based practice. What is it? How we ended up with this? Why it is important in the whole process? Who is doing it? Why we're doing it? So a lot of interesting stuff, as we are always searching for answers in our questions. These are some terms that you should know by the end of this chapter, right? And if you see our book at the very end, it has explanations about all the terms. So there's a glossary with the terminology for each chapter. So here we see clinician client, evidence-based practice, and randomized control clinical trial, or randomized control trial, RCT. That's something very important also to understand from this chapter. This is a definition of evidence-based medicine, right? And although it is about medicine, it applies on our field as well. So here you see that evidence-based medicine is the integration, move my face from here, of best research evidence with clinical expertise and patient values. So first of all, I want you to pay attention in terms of integration. So we have to integrate. And then we have all the evidence that we get from research. That's one, right? So we have 3 players here. One is the research and the evidence that comes from that. The experience of the clinician, in our term, like you may be a coach, you may be a trainer, you may be working at a hospital, you may be a certified physiologist. I don't know exactly your profession, but the practitioner's expertise, that's the second player here. And the third player is the patient. What is important for the specific patient? And by patient, as we'll see, we talk about the trainee, the client, however you want to call the person that needs our service, our advice, okay, our care. So this is a very nice definition that although it comes from medicine, it's very similar for our field as well. All right, so again, what is evidence? The best, right? So what's best today wasn't best yesterday, and it won't be the best tomorrow. What I'm trying to say is that there's new evidence coming out every day, right? So the best depends on timing as well. So if you search the same thing a year from now, or if you search it a year ago, the best scientific evidence will be different, right? And that, of course, applies on the specific question problem, as you can see that we have the case. What is practice? All this, and some kind of intervention, service, therapy, right? Who is a clinician? I said it can be anybody, any practitioner, right? And who is the client? The person who wants that care, treatment, or okay. All right, so this is pretty important, this figure, because it shows the 5 steps. And I want you to remember this because later on we're going to talk about these 4 steps, the very 4 steps going together, and then the 5th step coming back. You'll see a different figure. So you'll see that it is a dynamic process, right? And it's a closed loop kind of process, and you will see it in a little bit. You see that the very first thing you have to do is formulate a specific question. And this is very similar to when you're doing, let's say you have a research question to conduct research, right? In this one, we're talking about what do I need for my specific case client, right? I have to formulate a question that it is very specific to what I need right now. When I have that, which is the most important thing because it just shows me the way, I can go and search the literature. Once I search the literature, I can figure out from all the evidence that is in there what is relevant to my case, what is important, what is high quality research that I can use. And then after I evaluate what I find, I have to decide. I have to decide based on the options that I have, based on, again, on what we already know. Okay? So I have a research question, I'll search the literature, I identify what is significant for me and the options that I have based on what we know. And at some point, I need to make a decision, right? And once I make that decision, I apply it. Once I apply it, I have to evaluate. Did it work? Did it not work? How much do I have to change something? Which is the part that, again, goes back to number 1, and we'll see it in a little bit. So these are the 5 steps that I want you to remember. Everything starts, though, with a very good specific question. Now, in order to have evidence-based practice, and in order to make this decision, this is another very important figure, right? Let's start from the top, and I want to stay here. There are things that I'm just going to skip, like the history, but these are kind of important things that I want you to remember and understand. I said that I have a specific question, specific case that made me have a specific question. All right, I went out and I looked for evidence, scientific evidence. I found, as we said, the best, right? And the one that I can apply to my case. Now, that's one part, what we know, right? The second part is me. What can I really apply out of whatever I found as best evidence? Do I have the resources to apply all the options that I could have? No. Do I have the knowledge? No. Oh, yes. So based on the answers that I find in the literature, I have to make sure that I know how to apply whatever option I want to choose. Let me give you an example. Let's say that the best case for your client is to apply some kind of PNF, right? PNF is great, PNF is awesome, but it's also a skill, and you don't know how to do PNF. So here now, as a clinician, based on your experience and your skills, whether you're going to learn PNF and then apply it, or you're going to refer them to somebody who does know PNF, or if you are in an area that nobody knows this technique and there's no way for you to learn it really quickly and you have to do something with your client, maybe you go with the second best option. I hope that makes sense. So we have what we know, and then we have what we can apply or what we think is best based on our experience and skills, all right, and our resources. And then we have the client. What's best for this client? The client has specific needs, the client has specific goals. So whatever we decide to do at the very end has to take into consideration our specific clients' values and perspectives. Therefore, again, in order to make a decision, and in order to say that you made an EBP decision, right? You have to know that there are three players, and you have to understand that all three play a specific role in that process of decision making. Here are some historical data that I'm not going to go over. It's things that you can read by yourselves in our textbook, right? And they go all the way to RCTs. So RCT, and you'll see that in our book is the gold standard, right? Um, it really has to do the major, although I'm simplifying it, the major advantage of RCT is randomization. All right. RCTs are not perfect. However, they're considered the best way to do research. So they produce a higher quality of evidence or support, right? Because I've seen RCTs that are not of very high quality, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But in general, RCTs again, as you can see, are the gold standard. We have them like up there, right? When we do research. What I want to make you understand here is the process. Um, so the process of evidence-based practice, and this is what I want to say, the history part, you can read it by yourself. So first of all, again, the formulation of the specific question is really important. Okay, this is the cornerstone of everything. And if the specific question is not accurate, then the whole process is not going to produce the quality of results that you would like or you wish for. So this is very important, similar to doing research, similar to doing a research question when you're doing research. But this has to do with evidence-based practice, right? So again, research and review the literature. Again, you have to go out, see if there are any literature reviews, meta-analysis out there, Karen. Everything that you think is maybe answering your question, okay? So here, as we said again, you have found enough research, but you have to evaluate. You have to evaluate what you found, and everything has to go back to your research question. Everything has to go back to your question. Is this answer your question? Yes. Is this high quality evidence? Yes, you give it. If it doesn't, then it doesn't belong in any of your options, right? And or interventions, however you want to call it. So again, you make a decision, and we talked about how you make that decision, right? There are three players that you have to take into consideration: the literature, yourselves, and the client, patient, trainee. And then you go back and evaluate if what you did worked or not. Again, the four steps, as you'll see in a little bit, can be taken together. And then the fifth step can really inform how the whole process went, so we can go back and make adjustments if we need to. All right. I hope so far things are clear. One of the goals of this course in general is also to help you find research, but also evaluate it. So because something is published, it doesn't mean it's of high quality, right? Including my own research. It's not always the best evidence out there. You do what you can, right? But when you evaluate what you did, so when you're reading research, the mere fact that it's published, it doesn't say everything. We have to search a little bit deeper. So you see that we have to pretty much scrutinize all the information, methods, instrumentation, the sample, how they analyze the data, why they analyze the way they analyze it, the power, anything, effect sizes, anything, all the way to the end, which is the inferences of the results. So how they interpreted that data, what did they mean? Okay, and based on that, what kind of recommendations they made. So when you are finding a paper, yeah, of course you start by reading the abstract. But then as you become more experienced, you will be in a position to also kind of value the quality of the evidence, not only for your specific question, but also in general. You can say, this research not so high quality because of this, this, and this, or this paper, oh my God, look what they did, right? And all research has weaknesses, limitations and delimitations. It happens. There's no perfect research. But again, we need to be in a position as we become more and more experienced to evaluate something that is published. We'll talk about the peer review process and everything. But again, the fact that something is published does not mean necessarily that it is of high quality. So at the very end, in order to evaluate something that is published, there are some kind of, as you see, grading systems. There are many. There's sort that ACSM is using a lot, especially when they're coming out with some kind of statements, right? Female triad, they come out with a statement. They try to gather all the information that's out there, so they come out with a position statement, and they have that sort system that they put all the information that they found in the literature, they try to evaluate it, and they use only high quality, right? There are other ones, such as Petro, which I've used, and you can go online and find my lit reviews and meta-analysis that I'm trying to combine information, and I use Pedro as, again, a scale, a system, a standardized system to say if something has high quality or not, or in other words, high bias or low bias or whatever, right? NIH they have their own tools. You look at online, they have their own tools, and those tools can be based on the research design. So RCTs, they have their own tools. Then when you have one group, maybe case series, case studies, whatever, they all have specific tool that you can take it and evaluate its research that you like, its published research out there. So again, we need to be able to evaluate the research. And out there, sometimes, as I already mentioned, there are some papers that are called systematic reviews, and some others that are called systematic reviews and meta-analysis. Meta-analysis usually comes after the review. Okay, the very first part, there are many kinds of reviews, like mapping reviews or whatever, but let's talk about systematic reviews here. So systematic reviews, when you can look online, they're about a specific topic, and um, they run a search using several databases. They put the different keywords, and of course, it takes a lot of time, right? It's not original research, so that you're not actually doing research. You are taking all that research, you combine it, and then you come out with some kind of conclusions about whatever has been researched on this topic until the last day you run the search. So the systematic reviews takes all the research that has been done, for example, in my case, mental toughness in sport, right? And they come out with some conclusions that there is like the majority of papers have been published the past 20 years. The main players are this guy and this guy and this guy. We have two major schools of thought when we come into when we talk about mental toughness in sport, which is one looks like it's one is located in Europe and the other in Australia. The most cited papers are from this guy and this guy. The papers that publish more mental toughness are this paper, journal. Is this journal and this journal. It has been researched with this other positive psychology construct. You can come up with a lot of information. So if you want to take it a little bit deeper, for example, in meta-analysis, here you take those investigations and you standardize some, let's say they did some kind of interventions, right? And you want to see if mental toughness interventions work. So you standardize the scores so you can compare one research with the other. And then you come out with a thing called effect size. And then you make a statement about the effect size. So did it work or did it not work, right? Another thing that you can do that I forgot about the systematic reviews, of course, is, as we said, evaluate the research. So you take tools such as Pedro that I just mentioned, and then you evaluate everything, and then you make a statement about the quality of the research. You can make a statement about the most used research methodology, or that mainly we do male. We research like the participants are mainly males and no females. That this age group is mainly research, but not this group age group, right? This sport, but not this sport. Team sports, but not individual sports. Anything that you can create in the systematic review. The meta-analysis takes it a step further and talks about effect sizes, which again shows that we have standardized ways to put all those interventions and analyze them and figure out and conclude if whatever we're doing so far is working or not. That's about systematic reviews and meta-analysis. Again, they're not producing research. However, they are combining what we know so far, and that's why they're very important. Although they're not telling us anything new, they give us all this aggregated info, and in order to do a thing like this, it takes a lot of time, right? And it's a different kind of skill. ACSM, as I said, has position stands, and in order to come out with position stands, you have to do lit reviews, and sometimes you have also to do meta-analysis, and you have to use a rubric system. And as I said before, as you can see all the way down, SORT is the grading system that is being mostly used by ACSM. But again, in exercise science, evidence-based practice or grading tools is not something that we used to do it since forever. No, it's something that we started doing like 20 years ago. Okay, and that's one of the reasons the definition at the very beginning was about medicine. Medicine has been doing that. You will see that in the history when you read in your textbook. Exercise science, not so much, but lately we're doing it. Okay. Um, yes, so we'll cover that already, but when we evaluate what we decide to do, right, uh, and we get some feedback. It worked, didn't work. Mostly, some of it worked in these people, didn't work in other people. It may give us information to go back and do some kind of more specific research, an original study, right, or an RCT. So that's another thing that we get out of practice-based research. So practice-based research is not what we call before evidence-based research. So in practice-based research, it's not that it comes usually after the evidence-based, right? So we have the evidence, and then we apply it. Once we apply it, we get some feedback. That is a practice-based research. Very important, especially if you think about it in professions like ours, like coaching, right? Where we have a lot of practitioners. So we need the feedback from the practitioners in order to go back and pretty much do evidence-based research and then do practice-based research, and then we have a cycle, which I think there's a figure, there it is. So as I said before, the very first steps will come from research, right? And in a very simplified way, you can put, instead of research, you can put basic research. In practice, we can put applied research. So in a very simplified way. In the very first steps, we have the evidence base, as we said, we have the three players, we take into consideration all of them. We make a decision, and then we'll have to apply it, which is practice. Once we apply it, we get feedback. That feedback, it takes us back to research, which again feeds practice, which again feeds research. So the basic, as we say, research is not something separate from applied research. The evidence-based practice is not something separate than practice-based practice. They have to communicate. They need to communicate, right? Theorists, if you want to name it that way, and practitioners have to collaborate, right? Otherwise, we cannot have all this. That's why, as you see here, both of them have to be informed by themselves. Both of them have to practice the best way they can, and both of them, and all of them, like they can learn from each other. Clinicians will learn from researchers, and researchers will learn from clinicians. That's how it goes. One feeds the other. A lot of times I go to conferences, and a lot of times I have to talk with strength and conditioning coaches. And I'm standing there, and I'm like, this is what we know. Go and apply it, and please give me some feedback. Or a lot of times I'll be like, based on what you've applied, what do you want me to research? Give me some data. Give me some ideas. What have you identified as a gap? Give me some feedback. So I, as a researcher, go back and design something that I can help them with whatever question they have, and they go back and they apply it, and they give me feedback, and then we just keep going like this. So again, basic and applied, evidence-based, practice-based researchers and clinicians were not against each other. We were in the same team, and I want you to remember that. Yeah, that's all for this chapter. Next chapter is a little bit shorter, if I remember very well. Let me pull it up. I'm trying to keep these videos kind of short if I can, but at the same time explain as much as I can. I know that if something is really long, people will stop watching it. So I'm doing my best here. Give me some feedback, and I can adjust as we go. This is another chapter. So the very first chapter was introductory. The second chapter we talked about today talks about mainly evidence-based practice and RCTs that we need to know. And this chapter 3, you'll see, starts getting a little bit deeper. And as we are going over this chapter and the next chapters, please start thinking about your final learning opportunity and what you're going to choose to propose as a project. Okay? So today, as you can see, we're going to talk about framing the problem. Excuse me. We'll talk about, the purpose of the study, the hypothesis, the objectives, and the expected outcomes, the predictions that we have when we are um, choosing that research project of ours. So this is pretty exciting, and you'll see why in a little bit. Again, we start with this, and as you can see in the first chapter, in the second chapter, we talked about the evidence-based practice, which is up top on the right side. And now today, in this chapter, we'll talk mainly about what is right underneath search for answers on the right side again. We're going to start talking about how you design and develop a study. Okay? These are the key terms that I would like you to know. Again, at the very end of each chapter, there's a glossary. All right. As we said in evidence-based practice in general, when you're trying to do your own research, the cornerstone of everything is your research question, your RQ. So it's pretty important, as you see, to make it a good one, right? Again, this chapter is exciting because maybe you have been involved in a research project. Maybe you haven't. Maybe this is your first proposal. What we're going to experience, though, as we're doing this, is that pretty much we are in a position to create science. We are in a position to add something in whatever we already know, and we start with the blank piece of paper. So we can do anything in theory, right? But we need to break it down and become a bit more specific. But the exciting part is we are in that amazing position to create some legacy by just creating science. And that's amazing, right? So at the bottom of the pyramid, which shows that that's the base, very, very important, is the research question. And we're going to talk how we can do that. So this figure is really nice because it shows a lot of options. So you pick an area. So we're talking about exercise science. Maybe you like, I don't know, something that has to do with resistance training. And then you break it down a little bit more, resistance training for women, and then you want to do 25 to 35 or postmenopausal women, and you also want to do suspension training, that kind of resistance training, and you just break it down a lot, right? And you know what the area that you want to research. So then you go into the literature, right? You go into these databases, you put those keywords, we're going to talk about that. And also you have a very specific PDF on your Moodle site in your FLO folder that shows you how to do research. And you try to find out what's out there. So it takes time, right? You read the literature, you learn, and then one takes you to the other paper, and the other paper to a third paper, a fourth, and then you end up with hundreds of papers, and you read abstracts, you go deeper, you identify which papers are good for what you're searching for or what you would like to search for. Also, you may be practicing as well. And then you identify a gap, right? You identify a gap in the literature and you think that's important and you think you can do it with the resources that you have. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And you formulate a research question. A research question that answers pretty much that the result of that or the answer of that research question will cover that gap that you identify. Okay, so In the very beginning, as we will see, and that's a nice exercise that I still do, is you think like, okay, if I had all the resources of the world, what would be the ideal study to answer my question, my IQ? And then, of course, we don't have all the resources of the world. But let's say you had $10 million or $100 of funding, right? What would you do? And then you actually see what you have, and you make it more practical, and you see how many people you have. If you have a lab, what kind of infrastructure you have, how much time you have, and you make it more specific, and then you design something really specific based on practicality. And then you end up with what is going to be pretty much your FLO. You propose a research. You create your research proposal, and you break it down in all of these nice components that we're going to talk about in a little bit, right? So this is your topic, as I said. What do you like? What you're good at? What would be important to do research in society? And sometimes when you are under a mentor, an advisor, and you're working in a lab, you should most likely you'll do something that is similar to their research agenda. So if you were working under myself and you wanted to do PAD, peripheral artery disease, I'll be like, great idea, but I cannot support you. We don't have the infrastructure, and me personally, I don't have the knowledge or the motivation or the interest. So a lot of times when you go under a mentor, you do something similar-ish. Okay, as I said before, you go out there, you search and you search and you search. You start with the abstracts and then you go into the paper, and that's when you need to know how to read papers, study papers, evaluate papers. And then those landmark papers are the seminal papers, right? And in my, for example, research is Jones et al. 2002. That's one of the major papers. Or Gucciari 2015, right? There are some papers that are really important that have been cited again and again and again, and there's a reason for that. So you need to know the seminal papers. You see who are the major players, who are the major schools of thoughts and whatever you're researching. So you become more familiar with the literature. And the more you know, it takes time, the more you can evaluate. So you see what's out there, right? And you think about it, identify a gap, and you start having some thoughts like, okay, so maybe everybody has done this one, nobody has done this one, but this would have so much value. A lot of people would benefit from this, and you start having an idea based, of course, on the theory that's out there. You have to draw from a theory most of the time, and method-based research a lot of times is when you're trying to do a similar or even the same thing that others did, but because there's new technology out there, the method of doing it is different. It can be more accurate. Let's say you do VO2 max, and somebody has done exactly what you're thinking, but now somebody has developed a new machine that you can measure VO2 max, and indirectly by VO2 max you're measuring cardiorespiratory fitness level, right? Which is more accurate. And you found funding, and you're buying it. So now you can do the same thing that the person next to you did, but with better technology. So we have method-based research. Also, as you will see, we have hypothesis-driven research. You just have the hypothesis because you start, as you see, you develop a theory, and you think that you're expecting something to happen. So if this happens, this will happen. And nobody has done that. So that's hypothesis-driven research compared to method-driven research. Now you have to formulate your question, which is very, very important. You can start in the beginning from a general research question, but it has to be specific enough. It has to be specific enough. And we will talk about that when you're doing your own proposals, right? You have to have a very solid and most likely very specific research question. You need to be able to tell me, what are you doing, man? What are you doing, man? What's your research? What are you trying to answer? What's the research question here? Right? You need to be able to write that down and be very specific. Um, Now, as we said before in the beginning, you can start thinking about how to do it and start thinking in a way that, okay, if I had all the resources of the world, what would I do? So you start by thinking big. And then you see, as I said, how many resources you have, including time, money, and personnel. And you start making more and more and more and more specific. And you start kind of creating those options or alternatives, right? I have this much money, so I would either do it this way or this way. I cannot do both. And you pick. Uh, Ethics. Ethics is something that we should consider, of course, when we're designing research, and that will be a part of your professional development opportunity. About the 8th week, when you're taking the city training, and there, while you're taking those modules, you will see you will be trained in ethics, uh, at least the basic understanding of ethics when we're doing research. Also, we have a chapter that talks about ethics. Timeline, you have to have a timeline, right? Even when you're submitting for an IRB approval, they usually give you a year. If you need more, they will give you more as far as you make a case. That I need more time, I need more time to collect additional data. But you have to have a timeline. You have to figure out if you need funding and how you're going to find that funding. What kind of equipment, as we said before, those are practical considerations, right? You have, or what kind of equipment you need. Maybe you go to your dean, as I have several times, and ask for something. There is internal funding always at schools, um, and maybe you get it if you make a case. When again you are creating the proposal, you have to talk about not only the innovation of your study, but the significance of your study. Who cares? Why is this important? To whom it would be important? Who would care if you find what you think you'll find, right? And, and there are a lot of ways to interpret that, tell a story with your research, as you'll see in your book. But and I want to combine the tell a story with your research with keep it simple. Don't always try to go for the most sophisticated and complicated design. A lot of times, you know, you're not supposed to just do one project. You may have a bigger question to answer in the long run, but there are many small projects that you have to do in order to reach that point. So maybe when you're submitting your proposal, maybe you talk about the research you have already done and how this is going to help you as a stepping stone to reach your fourth research and then your fifth research, and then answer a bigger question. Or you could say what others have done and how yours will just come together with your evidence with their evidence, and answer a broader research question. Or you can just give us the whole idea behind the very first project that you're doing, which may be a pilot study, and how this will lead you to the second project, and hopefully the third, fourth, fifth, and whatever. Right? Life is a marathon, and research can be a marathon, and answer a bigger question, a bigger research question can be a marathon. Of course, divided by smaller races that you have to run in order to complete the whole marathon. Keep it simple, yes. Keep it simple. Don't keep your proposals airtight, and do not try to go very wide, Try to be very specific. Try to keep it simple when somebody's reading it, and try to show the before and the after. Just try to, like, your research proposal has had a flow. Try to explain what you're doing based on what you know and where you want to go in the future. Keep it simple. This is really, really important, right? And in our book, again, they have an example why you should keep it simple. So I encourage you to read all this information. This is a nice figure that shows how from the bottom you go all the way up to the research project. And I think it's very important for you as you're thinking about yours to see, in general, some kind of major decision that you have to make in the process, right? So when you're writing, of course, and most of the time you have an executive summary, which is 300 words, sometimes it's 200 words. It's kind of an abstract when you're reading a paper. It puts in there all the information that somebody will need when they're first reading it. It is important because if a committee is reading this, if the summary, the executive summary is not good, they're not going to be very motivated to read the rest of it. The purpose statement is really important because as you are talking about the literature in the gut, you need to create kind of a funnel approach, right? That brings me down here to the purpose statement. So you tell me this is what we know, this is what we don't know, this is important, blah, blah, blah. And then therefore, the purpose of this research will be to examine, investigate this, right? And then you go move into the objectives, which are more specific, and they explain how you're going to examine, investigate, explore whatever you said in your purpose statement. So you may have primary objectives, and you may have secondary objectives, right? So we're going to do this by doing this, and you're going to do this by doing that. Cool. Then you have hypothesis. So if this happens, this will happen. And what is a hypothesis? A hypothesis is a guesstimate, which means you've read everything that's out there, you have the experience that you have, and based on everything, you make a guesstimate, right? We don't know that, and that's why we're researching it. But based on what we know, we would expect this to happen if this would happen. So as you see, if I do X, then Y will happen. And that's a guesstimate again, because of everything you've told me out there in the introduction. You've given me everything we know out there in the literature, and that's why you guesstimate this. That's why this is your hypothesis. Again, you can have primary hypothesis and secondary hypothesis. And of course, what are you expecting? What's the predicted outcome? So we're expecting this and this to happen. So if we do this intervention, we expect those scores to go higher or lower. LDL to go up or down, or HDL to go up or down because we did this kind of intervention. You have to tell me what you are expecting as well. Yeah, we covered all this. Let me know if you have any questions or concerns. That's all for today. Again, we started very well. Keep doing what you're doing. And for Sunday, we'll have LO2 and LO3. And one more thing I want to say, as I said in the beginning of this video, is that I moved the office hours from tomorrow, Tuesday, to Wednesday, because there's a conflict. I'm presenting at a conference. So on Wednesday now, we'll have office hours, virtual office hours, from 8 to 12:30. All right, guys, thank you very much. I hope you have an awesome week. And if I don't see you on Wednesday, I'll see you next Monday through this video again, or at least you'll see me. All right? In the meantime, lift intentionally. No habit.